Welcome back to Brawl Time, the show that brings you all the monthly final news and storylines as we draw closer to this year's World Finals. Double Points has really caused a stir across the regions, as this was by far our closest monthly finals we've ever had. But which teams were able to secure their golden tickets to the World Finals, and who's not far behind? Let's find out. Kicking things off then with the SESA and ANZ region, and straight off the bat, we had to talk about Free Win Agents, or rather the team formerly known as Free Win Agents, as after many months of seeking representation, the team have finally found a new home, and we welcomed Brawl Esports onto the leaderboard. Coming into August, Stalwarts were undefeated in grand finals, but have had games go all the way to the final set in every monthly final bar one. So despite dominating the leaderboard, it remained to be seen if they would dominate the August monthly final, especially considering that this would be their first month competing without Response, who incidentally had joined the FA Team Wood roster, their biggest rivals in the competition. August also saw the return of both Serenity and the former Serenity squad, now going under the team name FARKN, who faced off against Blitz in the quarterfinals, inciting a harrowing dab-off between them. It was unclear in the third and final set whether Blitz couldn't handle the pressure of the game or the sheer amount of dabs sent in their direction, but either way, the message from FARKN was crystal clear: ANZ owns you. Last month, it was Brawl who gave Brawl Esports the biggest run for their money in a tense 3-2 semi-final back and forth. But this month, it was FA Team Wood who would cut Brawl upper bracket journey short. It was a short match that went to the third and final set, but in the end, Team Wood came out on top. Our semi-finals were lined up to be the most memorable of the year so far. On the one side, we had FA Team Wood in their tale of redemption to secure a win over their biggest rivals, Brawl Esports. And on the other side was a story of pride between a free agent team and the organization who let them go. In the closest battle for a grand final we've ever seen, FA Team Wood came this close to knocking out Brawl Esports. But at match point, it was Brawl Esports that had the ice in their veins to seal it.
Stalwart Esports continue the reign of terror. They are going to pick up and go to yet another monthly finals.
For FARKN versus Serenity, it was equally as intense, but less of a back and forth and more of a reverse sweep scenario, in which Serenity quickly reached match point in the third set, but were denied it a total of 3 times by FARKN, who, when it came down to the final game, locked in their place for the grand final. However, in the grand final, it became clear that FARKN were out of their depth against the reigning regional champions, and in straight sets, Stalwart Esports brought home the victory for the 5th consecutive time this year. Stalwart Esports went on to qualify for the September monthly finals, which now means that they've earned themselves a place in the World Finals, on the provision, of course, that they play out their quarterfinals match. But I think it's safe to say that we can fully expect all of the teams to have their alarms set on the day. Speaking of golden tickets, this month we witnessed our first team of the entire season to qualify for the World Finals. 3 guesses as to which team that was. We saw AC Milan Clash come back swinging last month after their MSI performance didn't go according to plan. But despite being the monthly final champions of July, their first match for August was against none other than their biggest rivals, Shazmat Gaming BR. The last time we saw the two teams square off in the quarterfinals, it was back in March, which resulted in a 2-0 in favour of AC Milan Clash, and this time round it looked equally as convincing with the same scoreline, and from there, AC Milan Clash ensured that nothing stood in their way, and became the first team in the entire BSC to lock themselves in for the World Finals.
There is some time ticking down, but Countdown once again makes sure it won't happen. AC Milan Clash.
This now means that there are only 2 more World Finals spots up for grabs in the region, but with little separating the competition, it's wide open for more or less anyone within the top 10 on the leaderboard, especially with double points taken into consideration. But one team we will definitely not be seeing at the World Finals, however, is Renegados, who sadly announced that they would be disbanding. Now, considering that their position was towards the bottom of the leaderboard, the news was somewhat to be expected, but what came as the greatest shock was that the follow-up tweets from Marcel stated that he would not only be waving goodbye to Renegados, but also to Brawl Esports as a whole. Now, for someone who has achieved so much within the competitive scene, understandably, this came as a huge shock to the region. It was an okay month for Zero Zone, who knocked out Portuguese Esports in the quarterfinals. True, they lost to AC Milan Clash in the semifinals, but considering they hadn't made it out of the quarterfinals since May, it certainly steps in the right direction. They continue to hold on to the number 3 spot on the leaderboard and are still in a qualifying position for the World Finals, at least for now. We also saw the return of Arena Casito, now renamed to Vatra Gaming SA, who we had high hopes for considering just how strong they were in the first few months of the season. But sadly for them, it was far from the return that they had anticipated for themselves, as they failed to make it through their quarterfinals match against Starline. Similarly, Six struggled this month, which came as a surprise, considering that they reached the grand finals in July. This allowed for M. Bernardos to take more of the spotlight, and their grand final appearance gave them a nice bump up on the leaderboard. They are now in hot pursuit of a golden ticket placement, so keep a close eye out for them next month in particular. Moving on to East Asia then, where going into August, only 3 points separated Zeta Division 1 from Zeta Division 0 at the very top of the leaderboard. To add to their odds, they sat on opposite sides of the bracket this time around, so there was every possibility that with strong performances from both teams, that the organization could potentially extend its reign over the region. But hold that thought for now. After their best performance to date last month, we saw the return of Blood Diamond, however this time playing under a new team name, Atara-chan Club, as it would seem that the organisation decided to drop the team despite there being no official word from their social media presence. Now, admittedly, I was this team's biggest critic back in May, but having watched them start to find their momentum, you can't deny that they are a serious frontrunner to catch up to Zeta Division if they continue to flourish. This month they reached the semi-finals again, but okay, they lost to Zeta Division 0 in straight sets and only won a single game against them. But they are a team that consistently qualify and have both the experience and the potential. Ahead of them in third on the leaderboards, however, is Rising Sun, and this is the team that, in our opinion, has the greatest chance of causing an upset in the East Asia region. Rising Sun has Zeta Division 0 in their sights, and has won more sets over the organization than, well, their own organization. The semi-finals were close, but in the 5th and final set, Zeta pulled up their socks and got the job done. And we thoroughly believe that Rising Sun stands a decent chance of winning a grand finals before the season is out. And with double points, just one singular monthly final win could be enough to draw a wedge between Zeta Division and claim a golden ticket to the World Finals.
The Tempo is gonna secure it, takes down Wahochi, and Zeta Division 1 are gonna go to the grand finals once again.
Well, we couldn't have an East Asian monthly final without a Zeta Division 1 versus Zeta Division 0 match thrown in there somewhere, could we? And what better place for it, though, than in the grand final? It's been a great month for Zeta Division 1. Despite losing to their sister team in the July monthly finals, they redeemed themselves in the Snapdragon Pro Series, where they took down Zeta Division 0 to be crowned Grand Champions of Season 1 in the Asia-Pacific region to the tune of $16,000. This month in the BSC, however, it didn't go unnoticed that to make the Grand Final, they struggled in their quarterfinals match against Veritalian and again in their semi-finals match against Rising Sun Esports, shedding some doubt over whether they were performing at a high enough level to take down the might of Zeta Division 0. Concerns, however, were quickly put to rest in what became one of the most one-sided of all their matches, as in a shocking twist, Zeta Division 0 failed to win a single game in the series. The win keeps Zeta Division 1 out in front on the leaderboard, but the gap between the two Zeta teams has obviously increased slightly yet again. Since the season began back in March, we've had a different team win in the EMEA region every single month, which begged the question, would a team be able to break the cycle and bring home the gold for a second time this year? In what was the closest quarterfinal of the year so far, with every match going the distance, we saw swift exits for Doxter Lobster, Croix Clan, and Navi. But one team that it's safe to say that we did not expect to fall at the first hurdle was SK Gaming, who were knocked out this month by Dark Horses of August and fan favourites Grombol, comprised of KC, Boss, formerly Team Humble, and Jaime. After depriving SK Gaming of yet another semi-finals appearance, Grombol melted Team Kesso in a convincing 3-1, and against all odds made the grand finals, shattering many of our predictions in the process. It was a convincing performance that placed Grombom on track for a potential World Finals placement, leaving many of us wondering, where do Grombom go from here? Well, what we do know is that immediately after the monthly final, Casey tweeted that he was a free agent looking for a team, and just 2 days later, Team Kesa dropped the bombshell, that pun was intended, that they would be parting ways with Blacksea and signing Boss to the team. This change came as the third roster change for the organization in just 2 weeks, after also having waved goodbye to Rafa, so all in all, some pretty bold changes in the hopes of improving their position on the leaderboard, and we shall see soon enough whether or not it pays off for them. After Reply Totem's big win last month, they were considered by many as the favorites to win. Praise Clan, though, undoubtedly gave them the toughest time in the quarterfinals, but after an impressive reverse sweep, Totem looked well on track. They clashed with Tribe Gaming EU in the semi-finals, but with Drage on the bench for the first time this year, it just didn't feel like Tribe with themselves, and they won just 1 out of 7 games. Reply Totem prevented Tribe from making the grand finals for the first time this year, and brought forward their momentum into their finals match, where they defused Grombom in yet another 3-0 victory to become the first team in the EMEA region to win multiple monthly finals.
And Maru can just slot this in, quite easily done. That is going to be it.
Not only that, but following a successful upper bracket run in their September qualifier, Reply Totem became the first team in the EMEA region to lock themselves in for the World Finals, providing of course that they check in and play out their quarterfinals match. From 7th place to 2nd to 1st, and now securing a World Finals spot. That's the power of double points, people. Despite a shaky bracket run at best, where Tribe Gaming EU were almost knocked out in round 8 by F8 Twins, they also persevered enough to qualify for September, and in doing so, providing that they perform on the day, have also earned themselves a golden ticket to the World Finals. In a shocking twist of fate, both Team Humble, formerly OGS, and STMN EU did not qualify yet again for September, which will undoubtedly now increase the gap between themselves and teams like Navi, Bax, and Dogs to Lobster. So keep a close eye on those teams in particular as we go into next month. We saw out August in the North America and LATAM North region, where Tribe Gaming NA was in a formidable position to earn a spot at the World Finals, on the condition that they not only won the monthly final, but also had Vanguard fail to make the semi-finals. It feels like we've gradually moved away from a time when Tribe's biggest rivals were STMN, which admittedly does feel weird as well as sad to say. It's been a particularly tough time for STMN over the past few months, as in July they failed to move past the quarterfinals, and a difficult decision was made to have OG step aside to allow Bobby, Cute Sans, and Zara to try for better results. Sadly for them, though, they also failed to qualify for the Snapdragon Pro Series playoffs in what was arguably one of the biggest upsets of the entire season, and underdogs West Coast were able to pull off a comeback so insane that they could barely even believe it themselves. This month, STMN had one of the toughest quarterfinal matches. Shazmat Gaming NA had also narrowly missed out on the SPS playoffs, so were eager to prove a point and put STMN through their paces. In what was the closest of all the quarterfinals matches, it went all the way to match point before it could be decided. But STMN dug deep within themselves and avoided a consecutive early exit.
Shazmat Gaming sits down Stamina, going to the semifinals.
After making the grand finals last month, Vanguard Gaming continued to look strong. Recording Esports proved to be a worthy adversary in their quarterfinals matchup and were able to bring back a set, but Vanguard closed it out in convincing fashion to take home the win. In the semi-finals, however, they faltered against Bachelor Gaming in a 1-3 scoreline, but regardless, their performance was enough to narrowly hold on to the number 2 spot on the leaderboard. But it must be said, STMN and Bachelor Gaming are not far behind. Speaking of Vatra, what a month it was for them, and August saw their best performance to date as they secured a place in the grand final. Despite only managing a 2nd place finish, double points has brought them hot onto STMN's trail, and as we move into September, genuinely anything could happen within the top 5 leaderboard cluster, considering just how few points separate them all. With the exception, of course, though, of one team in particular, Tribe Gaming NA. Tribe are looking really scary, and there is no doubt about it. They are truly at the top of their game, and the craziest part is this was one of their most convincing monthly finals to date, as they only dropped a single set throughout. Tribe took home the grand finals win for the 3rd month running and continued this dominance into their September qualifier to become the first team in the North America and LATAM North region to secure a golden ticket to the World Finals. All they have to do is show up to their match against Chasmak in September, and we don't see a world in which they are a no-show. Well, that's it for August, but strap yourselves in, because next month you can expect more World Final spots to be claimed, more upsets along the way, and of course, more incredible Brawl Esports action. Make sure you're following at Brawl_Esports over on Twitter so you don't miss out on any of the monthly finals to come, and continue to cheer on your favorite team over at event.brawlstars.com. Until then, it's goodbye for now.